Hello there, welcome or welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Samantha and this is my channel where I talk all about books. Anyway, today I'm coming to you with my November wrap-up. So we're going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of November. Now, November started out so strong for me. I was doing really well, and actually I had a really good month in terms of ratings. My lowest rating was 3.5. My highest was 4.5, so I didn't quite reach the 5-star mark, but I overall had a pretty great reading month until I started reading a very popular sequel which came out in November, which took me like 2.5 weeks to read. Like it was quite a slog to get through. And it kind of put me in a little bit of a reading slump. I feel like I'm out of that now, but like just while I was reading it, I just could not get into it for the longest time. Anyway, we'll talk about that book when we get to it. But yeah, I'm just going to chat about the 7 books that I finished in the month of November. And as usual, we're going to start off with my reading stats, which I get from Storygraph. So let's go over those. So in the month of November, as I said, I read 7 books and I read a total of 2,448 pages and listened to 5.52 hours of audiobooks. I also didn't have a single DNF in November, which is amazing. I don't remember the last time I didn't DNF at least one book in a month, so I'm very happy that I actually enjoyed everything that I read. In terms of mood, my most popular moods were hopeful, funny, adventurous, and then also some tense, lighthearted, emotional, dark. As usual, a whole variety of moods, but I feel like I did read a lot of like light romance books this month. In terms of my pace, weirdly, I normally read more medium-paced books, but I actually read mostly fast-paced books, reading 5 fast-paced books, and I read 2 medium-paced books in the month. As usual, I mostly read books between 300 and 499 pages, but I did also read one book that was under 300 pages and one book that was over 500 pages. So that's good. Finally reading some more long books. And as I said, I only listened to 1 audiobook and it was less than 8 hours. In terms of my fiction non-fiction split, I read 6 fiction books and 1 non-fiction book. So keeping on my goal of reading 1 non-fiction book a month. I think I will actually complete it, although like it wasn't actually 1 a month, but I think I will have read 12 non-fiction books in the year. So like it works out. But yeah, I need to be better about actually kind of sticking to that. But then, you know, you're not always in the mood. In terms of my genre, as I said, I read a lot of romance. So I had 4 romance books, 3 fantasy books because there was some like romantasy in there, 2 contemporary, and then all the other genres were just 1. And then in terms of my rating, this is like maybe the best reading month I've had this year, which is kind of sad. My average rating was 3.83. I only rated 6 books because one of them was a memoir, so I didn't rate that. I had 3 3.5s, 2 4s, and 1 4.5. So really not too bad considering the year that I've had. And I did read every day in the month, although around Thanksgiving I just read 1 page each day so that I could keep my streak. And the most pages I read in one day was 316 because I read most of a book in one day because it really gripped me and I couldn't stop reading it. So those are all of my reading stats. And now let's talk about the books that I read. I'm first of all going to go over all the books that I read and what I rated them, and then we'll go into the reviews. So the first book that I read in the month of November was Bookshops Bonedust by Travis Baldree. This is the prequel to Legends and Lattes, and I gave this a 3.5. Then I reread A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas, and I also gave this 3.5. Then I read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, and I gave that 4.5. I also read Woke Up Like This by Amy Lee, which I gave 4 stars. Then I read In a Holidaze by Christina Lauren, and I also gave that 4 stars. Then I read The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, and I didn't rate this as it's a memoir. And finally, I read Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros, and I gave that 3.5. So yeah, but I did actually already talk about None of This Is True in a bit of detail in my most recent vlog, where I swapped my screen time for reading time. So I did kind of review that book in that video. So I won't talk about that book again. As you know, that was my favorite book that I read this month. I gave 4.5. It was a wackadoodle time, as they say. But if you want to know my full thoughts, you can check out that video, which I'll link up in the card. But yeah, let's get into the reviews. So I'm gonna go in order from like lowest rated to highest rated. However, I'm first gonna talk about The Woman in Me, which I didn't rate, and that's not because it was bad, just because it's a memoir. So I won't go into a lot of detail on this one, but I was really interested in this one because I was actually a Britney Spears girly back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I mean literally when I was a small child, because I kind of didn't realize like how long ago it was that Britney was was popular, but I was like 5 years old and loving Britney Spears. Like, it's crazy. I actually saw a video this morning which was like songs that are turning 20 next year, and Toxic was one of them, and I loved Toxic as a kid. I had a few of her CDs and I would, you know, make up little dances and listen to them all the time. I don't know what it was. I kind of forgot about that, but I had a Britney phase. I was gonna say weirdly, I had no idea what was going on, but obviously I didn't have any idea what was going on. I was like 5 or 6 when everything kind of happened with her. All I remember when I was a kid was just all of a sudden, like, Britney wasn't cool anymore. Like, she was crazy. She'd gone off the rails, like, and everyone kind of made it out like she was like on drugs and all this. And like, that wasn't the case. The media seriously gaslit us. Oh my god. I'm actually really glad that I read this because there's so much that I didn't know about her. I didn't even know she had kids. Like, obviously as a kid, why would I have known that stuff? I wouldn't have. But as an adult, I still hadn't really clocked any of that. People have just been so bad to her, and she deserves better. And Justin Timberlake is trash. I learned a lot in this memoir, and I'm really glad that I read it. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Bookshops Bonedust by Travis Baldree. This is the prequel to Legends and Lattes, as I'm sure you know. I read Legends and Lattes earlier this year. It was like in the summer, I think. And I really loved that book. I thought it was just so sweet and wholesome and just like a little warm hug in a book. And I wanted the same sort of feel from Bookshops and Bonedust. And I think it did deliver, but I just wasn't that invested in this one. Let me rewind. So basically, Bookshops and Bonedust follows the main character, Viv, who's the main character in Legends and Lattes. So she's kind of just joined up with the crew that she was running with. Unfortunately, she is injured during some sort of adventure. So she just kind of has to wait in this small seaside village while she recuperates, and they're going to come back for her. So while she's there, she meets someone called Fern, who owns a little bookshop, which isn't doing super well. And she kind of discovers reading for the first time and really enjoys it. And so she helps Fern out with her little shop. She meets up some other characters, and it was just very sweet and nice. However, because it's a prequel, I think it's really difficult to kind of like have any sort of stakes. These are very low stakes books. Like the whole tagline is like high fantasy, low stakes, but there are still some stakes, and it's like you kind of know everything's gonna be okay because it's a prequel. And the other thing is that obviously, because you know what happens in the next book, you kind of know that all of these relationships that are being formed are just very temporary. So in a book that's mainly about character relationships, it's kind of difficult to like root for it because you know it's just temporary. So I don't know, I just found like I didn't love it. I enjoyed it, but I preferred Legends and Lattes a lot more. So I only gave this one 3.5, and I think I gave Legends and Lattes 4.5. So it wasn't bad, but it's just not what I wanted. I just wanted Legends and Lattes again. But actually there was something in the epilogue which was mentioned that I feel like would have been a better idea for a sequel to Legends and Lattes, but oh well, maybe we'll get that in the future. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros, a highly anticipated sequel to Fourth Wing. I read Fourth Wing back in August, I think, and so I've been looking forward to Iron Flame since then. And I actually ended up buying it because the library didn't get it for like 2 weeks after it came out. So yeah, I was impatient and I bought it like the first weekend after it came out. But I don't have it at the moment because I lent it to a colleague at work. If you don't know what Fourth Wing is, somehow, have you been living under a rock? It is a new romantasy series set in this war college in this world where there are dragons, and basically people go to this war college to train and become dragon riders and defend the country. And basically the first book follows our main character Violet, who is actually the general's daughter. However, she has always been planning to be a scribe, but her mom, who's the general, says that she has to join the war college. So she's basically forced into it and really doesn't want to go. And while she's there, she meets the children of the rebels who are there, who obviously hate her because their parents were killed by her mother. And the one who should really hate her the most is a guy called Xaden, but he doesn't hate her. He's an enemies to lovers, and it's so fun. The first book is so fun. The second book, however, it was very rushed. Like, I think the publishers were really pushing her and like, you need to get this book out this year while it's still super hyped. And I think that was a mistake. They should have pushed it till next year. I would have waited. I would have been mad about it, but I would have waited because it was just like 150 to 200 pages too long. Like, there was loads of stuff that could have been cut out, and I think it could have just been edited better. I know also that loads of people have had misprinted copies because it was so rushed, and I just don't see why that was necessary. Like, back in the day, you would happily wait a year between releases, maybe even 2 years. Maybe you wouldn't be super happy about 2 years, but like, that was the norm. That was the expectation. So I don't know why it's now like, oh, it has to be 2 a year. Like, just don't push it. Just take your time and make a better book, because the first half of this book was to me, incredibly boring. And the second half was where it really picked up. But then it was a little bit rushed. And yeah, I don't know. I also think that the ending was so predictable. I was actually reading that book while I was at work, and I was talking to my friend about it who had already finished. And I was like, oh, I've got like 50 pages left, and I'm 100% sure this thing is going to happen. And it happened. So yeah, and I'm not very good at predicting the ending. It was very predictable and it was rushed. But that's not to say that I disliked it. I still did enjoy my time reading it. I will definitely continue on with the series because I know some people have said that's it, I'm done. But I want to see where it goes. I'm worried because it's a 5-book series, and where we left off is kind of like, how are you going to make this 5 books? But I'm also intrigued. So yeah, I'm definitely going to give it at least one more book. Who knows, I might be there all the way till book 5. But I enjoyed it, but it was just not the same level as Fourth Wing. So a 3.5. I thought I didn't have any of the books physically. I do, I have one. So the next book I'm going to talk about is another 3.5. And that was my reread of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I actually mostly listened to this on audio. I only read a tiny bit of it physically. But I think because I started off reading it physically, Storygraph thinks that I only read it physically. But I actually listened to the audio, which was pretty good and a good way to get through this because I've basically just been like really in the mood to reread this. Basically since I read Fourth Wing, I was like, oh, I'm really in the mood for romantasy. And I kept on trying a few different books and it just wasn't scratching that itch. So I was like, okay, I need to go back to my roots, my Sarah J. Maas roots. Fun fact, I actually had an arc of this book when it first came out in 2015 and I had not reread it since 2015. So this was an interesting experience. And I have to say, without the audiobook, I think I would have struggled because it's not actually the book's fault, I don't think. It's because of what I know, having read the rest of the series. Like, it's just kind of a struggle to read some things in this book, knowing how it pans out in the future of the series. If you don't know what this book is about, somehow, this book basically follows our main character, Feyre, and she lives in this fantasy world where Fae exist. However, they live in like the Fae lands, so it is separate, but she lives quite close to like the border, so sometimes the Fae do cross into the human realm. And Feyre is basically, her family is really struggling because they used to be quite wealthy, but her dad made some poor decisions in the past and lost their fortune, and so Feyre is basically taking care of her whole family. And one day she's out hunting and she kills a wolf, but it's actually a fairy who can shapeshift into a wolf. So then the High Lord of the Spring Court, which is where this fairy came from, comes to take her as punishment. So it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Then she has to go live in his court and a bunch of other stuff happens, which I don't want to talk about because I think it will spoil things. I still did enjoy my time reading this, especially the last third to a quarter of this. There's kind of a trial element that happens, which I always love reading in books. I don't know what it is about trials, but I'm just so here for it. So yeah, as soon as that started, I really enjoyed it. But the rest of the book leading up to it, I was kind of like, I'm a little bit bored. I don't know. Like, there were certain things that I didn't enjoy. But I do actually have a much better appreciation for one of her sisters, Nesta, after reading this. Because when I first read it, I hated her. I was like, her sisters are trash. And to be fair, they are kind of trash. But I don't dislike Nesta as much, which is great because later on in the series, Nesta becomes the main character. So I'm now really excited to get to that book and continue on with the series because I only ever read the first 3 books in the novella. I still haven't read A Court of Silver Flames, which is Nesta's book. But yeah, it was a good time, but not a fantastic time. I'm very excited to get to A Court of Mist and Fury at some point. I'd like to say this month, but it's unlikely to happen because I have a big stack of books next to me that I would like to read in December, so we'll see. So the next book I'm going to be talking about is a book called Woke Up Like This by Amy Lee. Amy Lee is a romance author who has written 2 kind of new adult romance novels, which I've actually read both of them this year. I really liked her writing style. So even though this is a young adult book, I was like, I'm gonna give it a try. And this is basically like a 13 going on 30 inspired story following our main character, Charlotte. And basically Charlotte is in her senior year of high school and she is very type A and has always been really focused on basically doing everything that she thinks is the right move for the best high school experience. So she's always worked really hard at school. She's part of a bunch of extracurriculars and she always wanted to be the head of student council. And her kind of frenemy, JT, he actually became the head of the student council. And so one day they are trying to sort out things for prom decorations and they get into an accident and they wake up and they are 30 and they're actually about to get married. And so they're kind of trying to figure out like, how can we go back to that time? And also, how the hell did we end up engaged? Like, how did we get here? And this was really fun. I really enjoyed this actually, even though it is young adult, which I don't typically read a ton of anymore. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think it was really fun. I like that concept of like 13 going on 30. There were parts of this that were not my favorite thing ever. And I also don't think it's like the most memorable, but it was a really fun, lighthearted time. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it if if it's something that sounds like you would enjoy it. And the last book I'm going to be talking about is In a Holidaze by Christina Lauren. I've been meaning to read this book for a little while, and obviously because this kind of Christmassy book, I wanted to read it around Christmas. So this year was finally the year I got on it. I finally did it. But this book, if you don't know, basically follows our main character, May, and basically May and her family every year go to this little cottage and spend Christmas there with May's parents' friends. And May has basically had a crush on one of the children of her father's friends. They basically have two sons, and so she's had a crush on one of them since she was like a teenager. She's had a crush on him, and she's really good friends with the other brother. I'm sorry, I cannot remember the names, and Goodreads is not telling me. So yeah, she's really good friends. I don't know what their fucking names are. And she's really good friends with the other brother. And on Christmas Day, she accidentally drinks a little bit too much, and she ends up making out with the other brother, the one that she's friends with, not the one that she's had a crush on forever. And basically, it's just a really awkward situation, and they've just been told that the people who own the cabin are selling it. So that was the last Christmas in the cabin. And May is really bummed about this. So in the car on the way home, she kind of makes a wish out to the universe of like, show me what will make me happy. And then they actually get into a car accident, and she wakes up on the plane on the way to Christmas. So she basically gets stuck in a time loop to try and find out what is going to make her happy. This was a really fun time. I actually really enjoyed my time reading this. I really liked seeing like the big family aspect. That was really great. And I enjoy the romance. I quite like the trope of like best friend's brother. It's a trope that I quite enjoy. So I liked seeing it personally. I had a good time with it. I don't think it's like a new favorite or anything, or like a Christmas book that I'm going to read every year. Definitely not. But I would read it again. I will say though, I did think the time loop element didn't need to be there. Like I think they could have told the same story without the time loop, and it was just there to, you know, make it a little bit different, which is, you know, necessary. We don't want every romance book to be the same, but I just don't think it really added that much to the story. So maybe if they had scrapped that, it would have been better. I still had fun with it. I must read more Christina Lauren books because I think I've only read 3. I enjoyed it. It was a good, cute, festive time. It got me in the holiday spirit. What more can you ask for? Anyway, but those are all the books that I've read in the month of November. Please let me know what books you read down below. I would love to know. And also let me know what you're planning to read in December, because I have a pretty hefty stack of books to get through. But yeah, that is all that I have for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give a thumbs up. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe down below. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, could you leave me the confetti emoji for woke up like this? Like that's giving me confetti vibes. So yeah, leave me the confetti emoji down below. But yeah, that is all. So I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye. You can come in. Be careful. Ah! Ah! I said be careful. Why not?
They're making babies.
More! Love you. No, you don't.